So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us today from all over the world. Thank you for joining us for the launch of the SETBP1 Data Collection Program by RareX. I'm Haley Euler. I have an 11-year-old son with SETBP1 haploinsufficiency disorder, and I'm also the president and founder of SETBP1 Society. And what excites me about this program is that it expands upon programs we already have in place and that we plan to continue to participate in, including Simon Searchlight. So this continued goal is to capture more information on the disorder that is urgently needed to bring us closer to finding treatments and getting ourselves ready to be at that stage. The focus of this is to elevate the voice of the patient. So the SETBP1 Data Collection Program is not an institution or country-specific program. So it focuses on the individual without making any assumptions on their experiences or abilities, or even based on the diagnoses. It is user-friendly format that can be done online, on your own time, or your own pace. So we will be talking a lot more about that pretty soon. So drawing upon the theme from Rare Disease Day, which was just earlier this week, though we are rare, we are not alone. I wanted to share that every person that I've talked with at RareX has been a patient advocate leader for their own respective rare disease community. We also join about a dozen other rare diseases that are part of RareX's second cohort for launching of this program. I also want to thank Erin Oatness, who has volunteered to be our RareX ambassador. Thank you, Erin. And thank you to Eric Euler, the Vice President on the board of SETBP1 Society, and also happens to be my husband, for helping out on the side for this webinar. So let's start moving on to the presentation. So we are joined by Megan O'Boyle, who is part of the patient engagement team at RareX. Megan is also a parent of a child with a different rare genetic disorder called Phelan-McDermott syndrome. Through her experience with her own daughter's disorder, she's learned a lot about navigating the roles between science and research and advocacy for the patient. She's here today to talk about the RareX platform. And right before we get started, just a little housekeeping. I wanted to let you know that if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. I mentioned already, but we'll be recording this session, so it'll be available to rewatch later in this week. For those that weren't able to see it or missed anything. And now I'm going to hand it over to Megan.
Thanks, Haley. And also, if Haley or if you or Erin, when I'm going through the slides, want me to stop, just put your hand up. And if there's something that I don't make clear, this is, I've done this presentation a few times and it always seems a little different. So thank you all so much. I will tell you that my 21-year-old daughter, Shannon, that has Phelan-McDermott syndrome, which means she's missing the end of her 22nd chromosome. Shannon got diagnosed fairly early, 8 months. And the first 10 years, I did nothing with our foundation. I just showed up for meetings. And when they had research sessions, I would always go to the pool. So I am not one of those amazing parents that started a foundation or taught myself the research and learned to read all the PubMeds. I was that person that was like, I don't have time for research. I got to deal with an IEP and I got to get dinner on the table. And then when Shannon was about 10, some other parents that were very motivated go-getters asked if I would help start a registry. And I said, what's the registry? So I learned that that's data collection. And what was different was most data collections were done in research institutions, at medical centers, like Boston's Children, or at academic centers like, Duke, Stanford. And in 2010, it was just becoming a novel idea to have organizations like yours actually collecting the data and making it available to more people than one institution. And so we launched in 2011 and we asked a ton of questions and we expected everybody to come back every year, but we asked too many questions and they didn't. And we got the questions from our brilliant researchers, but it turns out that just because you're a brilliant researcher doesn't mean you're a survey methodologist, and there's there's lots of art and science to asking and answering questions the right way. So I'm going to talk about some things today, like standards. So I'll go ahead and get started. Just to reflect on Haley's point about Rare Disease Day. We are rare, but we're not unique. My own daughter's phenotype or symptoms are, she has a genetic cause of autism, epilepsy. She is non-speaking. She doesn't sleep without copious amounts of meds. She struggles with both reflux and constipation. She has lymphedema, low muscle tone, doesn't feel pain appropriately, doesn't sweat appropriately. And there's a few things that came up later in life that we weren't even expecting. And so I've come to realize there's lots of syndromes that look like hers. So to Haley's point, we are not alone. And I think you guys are really fortunate to have this foundation doing what they're doing. I'm going to go ahead and share slides. I will tell you, most patient groups who are doing something like this have been around for decades. When I learned the story of your foundation and how recently it was founded and how much you all have done, I was really blown away. So kudos to your leadership for recognizing how important data collection is worldwide and allowing caregivers to report. I'm going to try and run through these slides fast because slides are boring and questions are more interesting. But RareX is a nonprofit, and it was created out of frustration that the burdens were on the groups like you, and the barriers to getting data to research were insurmountable. So there's over 10,000 rare diseases, and these very small organizations with no resources were expected to do all the work. And having done that work for 10 years, I can tell you, I'd rather raise money than have to be in charge of a data collection. We collect data. Go ahead.
Are you able to show it in slideshow view?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
No, thank you, Megan.
We collect the data and we'll connect the data. I'll touch on that, and we share it. We get it out the door. And sadly, a lot of groups collect data, but they don't know how to get it out into the world, which doesn't do a whole lot of good. We don't own the data. You will. You as in the family, not the foundation. We don't sell it even to industry, biopharma, and we don't do research on it. One of the reasons that we exist is that either organizations like yours have data somewhere, but it's in a silo. A researcher has it and it isn't easily accessible, or the data has been collected, but it's not structured or standardized, which was our story for 10 years. And when that happens, it's not very valuable to researchers in industry. They tend to have to start over when the data is not structured. Or like many young diseases, there's just no data collection at all. So this crazy slide is to show you that you are one of over a dozen other groups. Most of them are neurodevelopmental disorders. You may recognize some of them, SYNGAP, FOXP1, and each group will have a community page, and I'll show you yours. And from that community page, you will then enter RareX. And RareX will have the usual terms and agreements and consents, but then there will be lots of surveys. You won't answer surveys that are not applicable. So if your child doesn't have vision issues, you won't have to see the vision survey, but you will get to see surveys that are applicable. And then at the bottom is the very important researchers. These are researchers from academia, medical centers, industry. That means researchers at pharmaceutical companies and biotech. They all have equal access to your de-identified data. And in case I don't stress it throughout this presentation, researchers will never see any identified data. It will all be de-identified. Even citizen scientists can access this data. The beauty of this is, traditionally, researchers had to know your data, your disease existed, and then they had to know that you had data, and then they had to apply to a foundation like yours and say, we want data for this purpose, and then the foundation then had to decide, was it worth the family's time? And then clean the data, get it out and de-identify it. And then who knows what happens to it? It might get published, it might not. And that's very time consuming for volunteer foundations. The way RareX will disseminate the data is the researchers will all go through one door. And that platform is built on the Broad Institute's technology, and it's something being used widely and globally right now for federated data access. The researchers will go in and establish an account and provide their credentials, and then they get to query data across everybody that's in RareX. So your class and the previous group of 10 and the hundreds that will come after you. And they can query by disease, by genetics, or by symptom. And I will give you a quick example. If someone were to go into the RareX research portal a month from now, and they were to query low muscle tone and epilepsy, almost every single community that's in RareX has those symptoms. So this researcher would be seeing data on patients across diseases. And the beauty of this is they may stumble across data on a disease like yours that they've never heard of, but fits what they're wanting to study. And I'm all for people stumbling across my child's data. So this slide is just to represent the ginormous responsibility, and I would say headache, that is governance. Governance means how data is collected, how it's stored, and how it's disseminated. And that is everything from what is in the informed consent, how is the data kept securely and kept private, how is the data moved from one place to another, and how is the data treated by the people that are using it. And all of that is highly regulated, and data regulations differ country to country. And there's ethical review and legal review, and all of that is on RareX. And I can tell you, this was my responsibility for 10 years when I was working on the registry for Phelan-McDermid syndrome. And it was a distraction from things I could have been doing. So your foundation did not just fall upon us and decide to collect data. They did a lot of due diligence, and they looked at all the other technology platforms in the space. And one of the reasons they chose us is that we are providing this at no cost to the foundation or to the patients or to the researchers. We are a nonprofit and we're raising our own funds. And that allows you all to spend the funding you would have spent collecting data on something else. They respected the fact that we have structured and standardized surveys, and that you as the patient or caregiver would own and manage the data. They absolutely were fine not having control over the data. They love that the governance was handled, as I showed on the previous slide, and that more researchers around the world would likely access the data through our federated data access. But why are you going to do this? We've all had to answer surveys. It seems like it's all the same questions, and sometimes they're not applicable. Sometimes it's depressing, and you don't. If you're anything like me, you're lucky if you get a shower 2 days in a row or more than 3 hours a night's sleep. So we know it's a lot to ask you to do something else, but we know also that it's worth your time and effort. Unlike a lot of research, you will see the results of this data. We will provide aggregate or summarized data to your foundation, and then we'll share it with you. And since many of you have never met another family with this diagnosis in person, and your doctor has never treated another patient with this diagnosis, it's nice to be able to look at a chart and say, oh, 80% of the other families are feeling this same pain that I'm feeling. The ability to be identified for a study or a clinical trial is also another great factor in RareX. So for instance, the example I gave you, the researcher that's looking at patients that have low muscle tone and epilepsy, maybe they drill down to a type of seizure and another variable like age and intellectual disability or something like that. They would then identify patients that they think would fit their study, which is going to be a much deeper dive. And they would contact RareX. RareX will then contact your community, your foundation, and let them know that someone's doing this work and that they should meet. And then we will send emails to anybody who qualified for this additional study. You never have to participate in something that you're recruited for. It's just you get to find out about it. There's also the ability to share your name and email with any foundations that are working in this disease around the world. And then again, you get to manage and own your own data. So what do you need to get started? Email and password. You don't need all your medical records. You don't need to have a detailed, family history of like the maternal side of your family had strokes or anything like that. You don't need a lot of time. I can't tell you how long it's going to take you because it depends on how many symptoms your child is experiencing. The more symptoms, the more surveys, but you don't need to finish it all in one sitting. And 2 tips for now: use Google Chrome or Apple Safari. Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, and Mozilla are not friendly to this platform. This is made for mobile devices, but after testing it, we feel like it's not optimal right now. So I don't recommend using your phone, your laptop, your phone, your iPad, or a tablet. But we are working to improve this because we understand that many people do things on their phones. So you all will, your community will find us through your website. We'll have information about the community page, learn more at the community page, and I'll show you your community page. And that will have the button where you enroll in RareX. You'll go through the usual, agreements and that you have to with any app, informed consent, which I'll talk a little bit more about, a data sharing survey, and then you're off to the races. So this is the page on your website. And from there you can, where it says register for the webinar, I would imagine that's going to say, learn more. And this is your community page, or as I call it, your front door. And I will scroll down and show you more after this. But this is going to show you what this is about, what the reason that you should do this for, and it has questions and answers. When you hit get started, you will then be in the data collection. Again, like everything else we do in this world, you need to see the terms of use and privacy policy. You'll scroll to the bottom, and I agree and start my enrollment. The next step, we need to know a few things in order to know which consent you need and to set up your account. And from here, I want to point out at the bottom, you can check more than one. So I don't know for sure. In Phelan-McDermott syndrome, there is a small population of parents that have a mild form of Phelan-McDermott syndrome. And so they are a patient and a caregiver. So you can be both. In most cases, you all may be a caregiver and you're going to put in information about your child who's the patient. You will then get that email that says, are you who you are? And it will be from RareX. And you'll follow the instructions. You'll get that verification code. This is only going to happen when you first set up your account. But let's face it, this is really important data, medical data, genetic data, and we want to make sure that it is secure. Then you'll go ahead and log in. And again, the Matrix is the technology platform. And so they have their own terms of use. And then we're at the informed consent. I, like you, have had to sign copious numbers of informed consents, and they are 25 pages, and they're written by lawyers. And if you read them, they actually are scary because they're trying to cover any possible thing that could happen. And most of the time, if we're with our child, we can't read them because we aren't able to. And so we just sign them. That's not informed. And it's fine if you're getting a Starbucks app, but it's not really what you want to do when you're giving your health data. So one, we didn't let the lawyers write it. They just advised us and we put it in questions and answers. So, you can go down and look at what questions are most important to you. And we have short answers and long answers. So we encourage you all to read this. You will get, if you're a caregiver, you'll get 2 of these, one for you, because we will eventually collect data about you as a caregiver, and then one for your child. On the second to last page, you state what your role is, and then I encourage you to say yes to these 2 questions. The first one says you want to have surveys sent to you, which you wouldn't enroll if you didn't. And the second says that if you qualify for a trial, that we can contact you. This does not mean you have to be in the trial. It just means that we can send you an email saying, Dr. Smith at University of wherever is doing a study and you likely will qualify for it. Then on the last page, you'll see legal first name, complete legal name. This is what's on your birth certificate. And even if you've never gone by Susie or Susan and you've always been Susie, this has to do with a coding issue for de-identifying the data. So it would just use your legal name. And your name will show up on the up in the corner, and you'll start to enter demographics. We were having some autofill issues. I think they fixed it. Just make sure that after you put in your last name, that this first name doesn't change. All of these demographic questions are, you will likely recognize them. They're World Health Organization approved, and you can say prefer not to answer. I just want to say this question used to make me crazy. I didn't think it was anybody's business what the estimated household income was, and I thought people were going to come ask me for money. This is asked for socioeconomic reasons. Your foundation will not be looking at this data. We will not be looking at this data, but somebody doing a study on whether somebody's socioeconomic status delayed their diagnosis, delayed their treatment, or possibly increased the rate of mortality. That's why researchers ask that question. There's also an insurance question. Again, you can say prefer not to answer. This is asked because we're trying to figure out if people are getting the coverage that they need. So after the demographics, we're now on the data sharing survey. Unlike the informed consent, this can be changed and edited as often as you want. The first page, you have to check one. The system won't allow you to check both, and it won't allow you to skip it. This is where you manage who sees your data. Do you want to share your data broadly, or do you want to share it more narrowly? And the first option is any researcher doing any kind of research, including research on genetic traits of different populations or socioeconomic issues. The second is a little bit more restricted, but still very broad. Any research being done in health, medical, or biomedical research. This next page I skipped because I personally want to share my daughter's data broadly, but you have the choice of saying you do not want data to be seen by commercial. That would mean drug developers, biotechnology companies, and pharmaceutical companies. The second question, and this is all explained in detail, says that you only want data to be shared with researchers that have gone through their own IRB process at their own institution. So that means somebody has overseen what they're doing and has given them the stamp of approval. The next questions are not there for us to help inform your foundation and community down the road. We ask if you have samples somewhere and where are they. We ask if you're willing to give biosamples. Are you interested in having your medical records connected to the data that you're providing? We're not doing that now, but if your community decides that medical records are really important, it would be great for them to know how willing the rest of you all are to doing it. The last question is, are there any other possible data sources? Are you in other studies? And I think for this one, if you said yes, it would be because you're in Simon's Searchlight, and you can just indicate that. This question says, do you want to share your contact information? Contact information here means name and email only. It does not mean home address, and it certainly doesn't mean your medical status. And if you say yes, that means we can provide your foundation and any other foundations that pop up around the world for this condition, your name and email. The second question is, I hate to have long questions because people tend not to read them, but essentially you're saying you're okay having your de-identified data included in dashboards or aggregate visuals of data. So, 40% of people with this condition have epilepsy. And again, I would imagine most of you would be in favor of that. So you've already set up you as a caregiver. You've answered questions about your language, your income, your marital status. Now it's time to add a patient. And so this would be for your child or children. And if you have more than one child with this condition, you would have to do them separately. Again, you're going to have the same demographics. And now you're at the dashboard for the patient. And I'll show you the one for my daughter so you can see in real time what it looks like. Right here in blue, it says new surveys, and in gray is completed surveys. I will actually show you the diagnosis survey and one or two of the others. We try to give you a time of how long it should take or how many questions there are. So if you only have a few minutes, you might want to pick something shorter. Again, you don't have to do this all at one sitting. So the health and development survey is the first one you're going to answer, and I call it the head to toe survey. It is very general questions about every system of the body. Now, your child may have conditions that are unrelated to this rare disease. This is not just about what is associated with SETBP1. This is about the whole child, the whole patient, and we want to know everything. So these are yes, no, and unsure. That's it. There's no deeper dive there. And like I said, there's examples underneath. So I think 100% of you would probably be answering yes to, has the participant had issues with brain or nervous system? And it explains seizures, epilepsies, delays, intellectual disabilities, learning problems, muscle tone. So my daughter has low muscle tone or hypotonia, and so on. So super general questions, but they unlock the surveys that you'll see going forward. So if you say yes to something, then magically on your dashboard, a new survey would come up associated with that system. So you'll see here level 2 surveys, and those are the surveys that are added based on your yeses in the health and development survey. So this is an example of a level 2 survey. So this person has said yes, that there's eye or vision issues. So now there's a deeper dive. Are there movement issues? Yes. Okay. If so, when did the symptoms appear, and was there a diagnosis? This person says no, there's not a difference in eye size. So they say no, and there's no more questions. It's pretty straightforward. At the end of all of these level 2 surveys, you can add in what wasn't asked, but please don't add your child's name, because if you say, Johnny has, a twitch, we have to go in and take out that identifier. Johnny would be an identifier. So keep it general, please. There is a quality of life survey. And because of families like ours, we have an answer that says, I'm unable to answer because of my child's condition and communications. For instance, I cannot state whether my child in the last 7 days has felt worried because she doesn't communicate clearly with me. She's nonverbal. So I had to check that box a lot. So how is this different than Simon Searchlight or another research study that might come along 6 months from now? We are meant to complement other studies. We're not going to replace them. We're not going to compete with them. We are meant to work with them. So, one of the ways this is different is it's not one specific institution or foundation. With the example would be Simons or Columbia Hospital. The ability to do that cross-disease research. Simons actually can do cross-disease research because they're collecting on hundreds of genetic causes of autism, but there's many research studies that are specific to one disease, and that's all they can look at. The ability for us to return aggregate data. And again, Simons does return data. It may not be immediate, but they do put out reports for families. But many research studies aren't able to share data until they have published, which could take years. So like I said, it's nice to know that other people are feeling what you're feeling, and it's nice to see what the numbers are. The other thing is the ability to update over years and years. Many research studies are funded for a finite period, 3 years or 5 years. So for instance, my daughter is in a natural history study at NIH. They see her 1 day per year for 5 years. So depending on whether she slept, how much traffic we hit, and whether she's feeling hungry or cranky, that's the snapshot that the researchers will get of my child. And that will be what they publish on in the future. As opposed to this type of online where you can say no to a symptom, for instance, epilepsy, and then 6 months later, if the symptom starts, unfortunately, you go back and you change that first survey. And when you say yes, then you'll see the epilepsy survey. So this is collecting. People ask me, is this a natural history study? And my answer is, that's up to you. The magical word in that term is history. Somebody can call something a natural history study, but if people don't come back in year after year at least and show the progression of disease, then it's not a history, it's a snapshot. So you will be encouraged by us. If you have not updated in a year's time, you'll get an email from us. It's really important that you keep things up to date. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing screen for now. I'm actually going to share another screen. Haley, are there any, well, I'm trying to get my technology together. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there was a question about whether or not this is, and we can cover it with two, it is language specific or country specific, because we haven't talked yet about the overall governance of language.
Exactly.
And yeah.
So right now, the community page, the front door is in several languages, and I'll show you. Once you hit get started, all of this is in English for now. This has to be global. We have diseases where there's 35 patients in the world. We can't just ask people who speak English, but we need to get through the English version and make sure that it's the best it can be before we start translating. We then need to go and make sure that we have met the data regulations of the country where the language is spoken. And like I said, every country has different rules. And then we do the translation. Then we check to see if the translation is going to be culturally appropriate. For instance, if there's a survey about fatigue, and the question is, do you take naps? Well, if you live in a country where napping in the afternoon is something the whole country does, that's a different reason than if you have a fatigue syndrome. So a lot goes into the translation. We expect to have Spanish and one other language by the end of this year, and then we will continue. Most importantly, you can enroll today from any country in the world. There is language somewhere that notifies you that this data is going to the United States. This is not a US only or English only data collection. This has to be global, but it has to be done right. And I'm going to share screen again. This beautiful page is your front door. And it says what your condition is up here. When you see get started, it turns yellow. That means that's where you're going to go in. If you don't bookmark it and 2 months later want to go back and finish some more surveys, you can't remember how to get there, you can always go back to log in if you've already enrolled. This again, it tells you why this is worth your time. This shows the foundation. Again, if there's other foundations around the world that pop up, they can be added. Nobody is paying for it, and none of these foundations own the data. So it's very collaborative. It shows you what the steps are going to be for enrolling. Again, this should be very intuitive. It shouldn't require a lot of explanation. And then these are frequently asked questions, like how will the data be kept confidential? How long will the data be stored? And so on. There is a translate button down in the left-hand corner, but once you hit enroll, then you're back to English only. So what other questions do we have?
At the moment, we don't have any of them coming in. I was going to just elaborate a little bit on what you were saying. One of the reasons we're also deciding to do this along with Simon's Searchlight is because it is getting your child's information out there to more people. So it's going to help spread awareness. It's also going to put it in front of people who weren't necessarily looking for a kid with SETBP1 HD. And potentially there might be a pharmaceutical company that's working on, let's say, ADHD, and your child would fit the description, and you might have that opportunity that you wouldn't necessarily have had in the past. Those are some of the unique reasons we were excited about adding this to our community.
The other thing about Simon's, oh, I'm sorry. The other thing about Simon's, and there's another great autism intellectual disability survey in Europe called Genida, is that they are focusing, they're doing a deep dive on all that is autism. And that's great. We're going to ask questions, but it's not going to be necessarily a deep dive. But they're not asking about bones and blood and skin and things that aren't associated with autism, because that's not what their goals are. We're asking about the whole body, and we think this is important. Many patients have, one could be de novo and one could be from your father's side of the family. So we want to hear about everything. I'm going to go ahead and show you Shannon's account. We just went through a huge upgrade on February 22nd, so it's very exciting that I can show you this now. Okay, so here it says I've already enrolled, obviously, so it says that my caregiver dashboard or Shannon's. So if I go to mine, it's pretty boring. It just says informed consent. Again, that's about me. We will have surveys that are specific to caregiving, like what's your quality of life? So I want to see what Shannon's is, so I go over to this book, see over here in this left-hand corner, right-hand corner, and that's a screen that I am trying to get rid of. These are the surveys I've completed. The health and development survey is the head to toe. Other name survey is other names of the disease. Race and ethnicity is a deeper dive, and that's because in many of the diseases we're working on, there is a higher population in certain cultures or countries. For instance, one of the neurodevelopmental disorders has a very high rate in Ireland for some reason. So that is what that survey is about. If it's not a high priority for you, I would go to the surveys that are higher. Obviously, you'll see down to these are the surveys that appear because you've said yes to something in the first survey. I'm going to show you this diagram. So, well, first, I'm going to show you the behavior survey. So it says it's going to take me 20 to 25 minutes. That's one of the longer ones. And there's 21 questions. Some take as little as 3 minutes. So make sure you read the instructions. In all of these surveys, the participant refers to the person with the disease. So you're not answering as a caregiver, you're answering about the person. So here I can say, yes, Shannon has a diagnosis of autism. Yes, she has a diagnosis of bipolar. We don't know if she's schizophrenic, so I'll say unsure. Yes, she has repetitive behavior. If I kept going, she has anxiety, she has depression. I don't know if she has hallucinations. She does not have OCD, but other kids in the syndrome do, detect, and so on. This will take as long as the number of yeses, because for every yes, you then have the age the symptom appeared and the age of diagnosis. But you don't have to have a diagnosis here. The reason I'm showing you this is you'll see here that I reported autism. But in the diagnosis survey, this one, this is where you report everything. And if you haven't taken a lot of surveys, you're not as frustrated as I am, but I cannot tell you how many times I have answered assessments or surveys about my child where they don't ask or give me an answer that's applicable, and I'm forced to check something that's really not accurate. And if it's not accurate, then how good is the research going to be? So in the diagnosis survey, it talks about newborn screening. There's one specific disorder you've never, and has to do with another disease. And I'm just going to show you here. So I put in that she has this syndrome. Different people are told their syndromes are called different things in different countries. You are to report whatever you're comfortable with. It's up to us to map that data to all the right diseases. I then reported autism. I could have said ASD. It doesn't matter. You're typing in whatever you're comfortable with. I reported ADHD, GI issues, and I'm reporting GI issues in the GI survey, but this survey is giving you an opportunity to list everything that you're going through. Low muscle tone, tremors, anything. And, depression, lymphedema, low muscle tone. It can be in any order you want. This again is so that we collect everything, not just what the surveys ask about. Haley, did I describe that in a way that is, have I confused the matter or made it more clear?
No, I think that helps. It's just in the symptoms section, you will list each symptom, each diagnosis separately, and things like hypotonia, or if we hadn't have been talking about this in all the training sessions they've been providing leading up to today, I would have just put SETBP1 haploinsufficiency disorder and then been done. But since then, I was thinking through he has ADHD, he has hypotonia, he has some eye issues and kidney issues that aren't related to SETBP1, and those were listed separately. So just keep that in mind. And then Megan, we do have a question. We had a family member join a little later, but it's a really good question to answer to reiterate. So this is back to, we have a European family, and what will that mean if they can complete a survey in English? What does that mean to them?
If they can complete the survey in English, that would be great.
Okay. And then the regulations, just how RAREX is currently set up.
We are working on data regulations, and I know the Europeans know about GDPR, some Americans do too. In America, we have laws for the federal government, and then every state has their own laws. GDPR is for Europe, and every country has their own version. So for instance, data has to be kept in that country, but in Italy, it can be in a cloud above the country, but in Germany, it needs to be on the ground in a server. So again, that's where we have to know the regulations and make sure that we meet them. Currently, there is a statement in one of its terms of use or the consent, I'm sorry, I can't remember, that indicates that your data is going to the US. So you're agreeing to that, this. So again, you can enroll from any country in the world. And we hope to get the translations as fast as we can. I just wanted to point out, so in the neurology survey, it also asks about muscle tone. If you don't want to do the diagnosis survey, if it's not a high priority, and I liked it because I wanted to report as much as possible. Frankly, I want credit for every challenge my child is facing. So that was my way of thinking about it. But you can choose to do that survey last, and do the other ones in the orders that are most important to you.
And feel free to put any questions in the chat that you have. Megan has done a great job going through the platform.
So
and of course, I'll note it now. I mean, of course, if any questions come up later and you think of it right after this ends or a week later or whenever, you can reach out to Megan or myself. So you can reach out to me at Haley@SETBP1.org. That's HALEY @SETBP1.org. Or Megan, if you want to share how they reach out
the
to
best
Rare
thing
Act.
to do is the support@rarex.org. And it should be stated in different places here. But you all are early adopters. I mean, you guys are on the cusp of this what's new about it is that we're handling all the governance. It's going to be global. And that fact that those researchers are going through one door and can look across diseases. So this is a new thing, and new things have bugs and they need to be fixed and updated and improved upon. And we can only improve it if you tell us what's wrong with it. So I want to hear everything. I mean, I got feedback from somebody from a European country that said this insurance question is not applicable to us. So we're adding a not applicable answer to that. If you feel more comfortable, complaining to Haley, she'll make sure I get it. And transparent, both Erin and Haley had to deal with a glitch where it said their surveys weren't there and they had to log out and log back in. And that may happen to you. I will also provide them with what we call is our that might be helpful for some families, especially if English is their second language, where there's some screenshots explaining some things. This should be easy and intuitive. So again, please share any feedback that you have. Please feel very confident that this data is held securely and kept private. We have daily work on governance to make sure that we are doing all the right things, and that you feel good about this. And that's why I'm encouraging you to read the informed consent. Again, no identified data will be seen by either your foundation or the researchers. We hope to connect data to future collections. So I'm just making this up. If your organization was approached by a pharmaceutical company or a researcher and they said, we want to bring 20 kids into a clinic and do a full workup and ask them a lot of questions. Ideally, the answer would be, that's great, but those parents have already answered 60% of the questions. So let's connect their Rare X data to Dr. Smith's data so that we're saving people time and hassle, and all the data is living in one place. So when that researcher comes knocking at the door, they see more than what you answered. This is our hope and dream. A lot of this is not dependent on technology, it's dependent on consenting and what other researchers allow families to consent to. But the ultimate goal is to get high quality data in the hands of as many people that can do something with it. And when I say high quality, that's why we're using standard surveys. We're not coming up with the questions ourselves. Your organization is not coming up with them. And we are doing a lot of work to make sure that the sleep survey that we choose is the best sleep survey. And that, again, everybody who is in Rare X, no matter what their diagnosis is, that has a sleep issue, is going to see the same sleep questions. Again, those researchers can look across diseases. A lot of us have some same researchers. I know some of you know Dr. Sid in Boston, and we do too. And a lot of pharmaceutical companies are going to be developing drugs that aren't specific to genes, they're specific to syndromes. My own child's clinical trial was, we followed rare Fragile X and Rett syndrome. So, the fact that we share so much in common with other diseases is a good thing, because treatments may be found for more than one disease at a time. So this is very cutting edge, very exciting. And again, kudos to your organization for thinking so far ahead. We were around 30 years before we had a good data set.
So if there's not any other questions, I'm just gonna give it one last request, and then otherwise we will wrap up.
I'm just going to say one thing. A lot of times people will say, well, when does the researchers get to see the data? If there's 150 of your families and 5 enroll and 3 finish the surveys, we're not going to send researchers to empty shelves. That's like sending somebody to the store and there's nothing on the shelves. They're not going to come back. We want your community, 50% or more of your community, to be enrolled as soon as possible, because once you hit 50%, whether you're a community of 100 people or 10,000, 50% is a significant statistic. Then we have the researchers come shopping for data. So it's really important that you all make time as soon as possible to at least get enrolled, get through that demographics and that head-to-toe survey. If that's all you have time for, we certainly understand. You will get reminders if you leave something incomplete, but we don't want to spam you. So you won't be getting an email every single day. So again, without being coercive or putting too much pressure on you, this is your opportunity to tell the world what your family member is living with. And the more people we hear from, the louder that message becomes. All right. Well, thank you all for sticking around to listen about data collection. I wouldn't have done this when my child was younger, but I'm so glad that you all did. This is really going to be a game changer for your community, and I think you guys should be really excited about it.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks to everyone who took the time out today to join us, and we will see you all online later. So be the hope, be the change. Thank you.
Have a good day.